Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're here today to talk Maxine, the third in the Maxine trilogy. Welcome, Hayden. Welcome back from vacation, too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back on content. We did do the WWE stream before this. Sorry if you hear any rustling, by the way. The cat's making a nest out of wrapping paper. But anyway, yeah, no, we're back. And I feel like I left at a crazy time because I came back and realized how much stuff there was that I missed while I was gone. I'm still trying to catch up on everything that I want to play and watch. So
Yeah.
I'm like halfway there. By the end of the week, I will have seen everything that mattered.
Good enough. Well, you went and saw Maxine after getting back, right?
I did, yeah. I saw that. That was like I had those tickets booked before I even left. That was appointment viewing for me. So
yeah, you were very much looking forward to this film. You enjoyed the first two. I actually had to watch the first two in the last month or so. I'd never seen them.
Yeah.
So
and you went
it's just
release order, right?
Yes, I did. I don't know if that's the right order. I think it is because I think it gives you context about that character before the second one, that adds to it. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad I did that before going to this. I would have been like, who the hell are all these people if I hadn't, right? But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It's not like I intentionally avoided it. It's just one of those things, you know, how sometimes something falls through the cracks and you just don't see it for whatever reason. Stranger Things on the TV side for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, we'll get it out of the way right away. We enjoyed this film. I think 7.5 is what we landed on here.
Yeah.
And so from a spoiler-free standpoint, before we jump into, details in the film, just high level, give me your thoughts.
So I was really looking forward to this because, like you said, I really liked X and Pearl. I've seen X, I think, at this point, either 3 or 4 times, which is it's weird that that's like a comfort rewatch for me because it's kind of nasty.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy that movie, and it has the appeal of both as like a summer sleepover slasher, but also as like a perfect Halloween elevated horror. You know, I think it kind of straddles that line really nicely for an A24 movie. So I was really looking forward to this going in, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. But I think the thing is, I left the theater a little underwhelmed, and I think a lot of that is down to you judge something in a franchise differently than you judge something that comes out, like on its own. And I think I would have liked, I think Maxine as a standalone movie, I would have liked a lot more, but because I'm comparing it to X and Pearl, which I love both of those movies, I think it fell a little short for me. But I feel like as time goes on and as I rewatch it, I think this is going to become one of those movies that grows on me with age. And there's a cheeky little line in the movie where they're talking about, I can't remember which horror movie, but they're saying like, well, which one of these is going to have more fans in 30 years? And I think this X trilogy, whatever you want to call it at this point, is one of those that I think is going to be like really popular with like summer sleepovers, college campuses. Like I think this is going to be one of those movies that like becomes and stays a cult classic.
Were you expecting more of a horror movie?
I was expecting more of a slasher. Like, honestly, I thought it would be. I was expecting basically just Scream, but with these characters. I thought it would be more of like a whodunit amongst the our supporting characters cast, and not to get like super film nerd on you, but it ended up being more kind of like there's this genre of Italian horror called giallos. And I feel like this was very much a homage to those, which is cool. I like that each of these 3 movies in this trilogy have a really distinct period of film history and genre that they're going after.
Yeah. I don't know. My initial thought leaving was that I might like this one the most. And it's hard to say. Like, I like Pearl a lot. Quite a bit. X I found to be like good, but not holy shit, type of thing. And this one I felt I think where this one's a little jarring is that even though it's only set, what, like 6 years after X or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
It might as well be 2 decades later. I mean, they're going for a totally different era. The vibe of the movie is completely different. Mm-hmm. Our main character is in a completely different place. I mean, at least relatively different place in her life, enough that it feels different. So,
well, I think the budget reflects that too. You know what I mean? Because it's a much bigger scope and scale. The first two, you're on one location, pretty much the entirety for both of those movies, and now you see, this, and basically you see all of Hollywood throughout this movie.
Yeah, and I feel like there's more macro level commentary happening throughout Maxine than there is in the first two. I think there's commentary in the first two, but I think it's more drilled down, so to speak. Which to its benefit, I think, right? I think that's a strength. I think it works here though. We have, I guess let's jump into spoilers at this point.
Okay.
So she is in Hollywood. She's become a relatively well-known like porn actress at this point, but she's trying to hit her like big break into, like mainstream film, for lack of a better term. We get reintroduced to her right as she's walking in to do an audition for this horror film. What's it called? The
Puritan 2.
The Puritan 2. Yep. So this is set. The Puritan 2 is a very intentional thing that's picked here. This is set against the backdrop of the like satanic panic era of the 80s and all that. Like, you see the protests and the hysteria around it, like going on all over the place in the background of the film. And I think that it plays very much into what we end up seeing happening at the end.
Absolutely.
What was your take on the introduction of a lot of like religious themes here?
So they were there in Pearl and X.
Sure.
Quite a bit in X, especially, but I think they were more overt here, right? As just kind of technology changes and people are getting radicalized through the TV set, right? Seeing more of the tele-evangelizing going on and stuff like that. And I think it was a really smart move too, because a lot of times, like, obviously the story is about the 80s, or set in the 80s at least, but Ti West is making this within the context of now. And I think we're seeing a lot of this kind of rise in things again, where you see people who are, they're using the rhetoric like, we got to protect our kids, or trying to do a lot of censorship and controlling of art and of how people live their lives. So I think it was a really clever usage of the setting beyond just like, we're going to make this a period piece because 80s nostalgia is in and it's a fun aesthetic to play with.
Well, I think it's also a way of saying that these things, have happened before. We should be able to learn from what happened before, right? These types of movements and this type of like fear. There's a moment where Elizabeth Bender, the director, in the movie, is says something to the effect of like, people who are angry and scared are the easiest to manipulate.
Yep.
Right. And that like hits, and it should hit for anybody that reads news articles today at all.
Yeah.
But so I feel like it was interesting. It was also like an homage to Hollywood too, right? There were plenty of moments. One of my favorite, like, first of all, Kevin Bacon's in this. I told Steven on our video game show the other day when we recorded the Axel F review, like, Friday was Kevin Bacon Day for me, because he's in Beverly Hills Cop 4, and he's in this.
In both.
So I saw both the same day.
That's funny.
And he is, completely there in both. Very different roles.
Oh yeah.
But he's there.
Steals the show in this, I will say. I was a little nervous going into this movie because there were a lot of big names, which the first two didn't have at all, right? With the exception of, I think, Mia Goth and Jenna Ortega now retroactively are.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is because of these movies themselves and what's happened since, right? And so you see the trailer, and it's got it has that moment where it's like Kevin Bacon and Halsey and Giancarlo Esposito, and you're just like, what the hell are they doing here? But I think it worked really well because all of those people played really good supporting roles and didn't stole the show in the sense that their characters were very memorable, but I think were additive to the plot rather than like, oh, we don't care about Maxine because this other actor's on the screen right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Mia Goth got to the point where she can hold her own in a scene with
anybody
of this caliber. Yeah, like she's great in this movie. I love the scene where the chase happens throughout the Hollywood studio. And it starts and it's very like themed in many ways. So this movie set in 1985. We'll get to why that's important in a sec. Mm-hmm. But it starts like in the middle of a like Western set, and you get the stare down, like they're gonna do the gunslinger showdown. They're both standing in the middle of the street, staring at each other, and it's like we're about to get the showdown at high noon or whatever. And that was really cool. And then it goes through. We visited the Bates Motel and the house from Psycho, which was really cool. That was in a couple different spots in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you see the shot of Maxine's looking at the Bates Motel and the director's telling her about like, oh, it was so like visionary to have like a woman, a grandmother as a horror villain. Who would have thought? And you see Pearl, just like shadowy figure in there. And I think there was a lot of good visual representations of the events of these movies actually having like real traumatic weight on Maxine. And I think in a lot of these horror movies, especially as a franchise goes on, you have a final girl where it's like Sidney Prescott is in 4 or 5 Scream movies at this point. You gotta wonder at a point, like, are you good? Like this keeps happening to you. Like I feel like that would really shake me and keep me up at night. And so the fact that they
mess you up, yeah.
And the fact that they showed that I think was, that's the A24 smartness, for lack of a better term, of these movies, right? That puts them as the quote-unquote elevated horror.
I like that too. The Halloween franchise has done that as well because Jamie Lee Curtis' character is in a lot of them. And by the time you get to the most recent trilogy, she's basically like a shut-in, right? She just lives in this like secluded, place with a bunch of walls, armed to the teeth, all of these things. Like this has had such an effect on her life.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. As the chase progressed, I got... it made me smile pretty good when she comes busting out of the courthouse into Courthouse Square, which is the set, one of the sets in Back to the Future, which is a popular 1985 movie.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't even catch that reference.
Yeah. And that in Courthouse Square is like a really like famous set in Hollywood, but that was one of the movies that was used in. Gremlins was another one, and many others. And since we're set in 1985, I figured Back to the Future is like our most obvious callback.
Yeah.
And Ti West was asked because the movie theater there has St. Elmo's Fire on the like marquee, and he was asked did you try to get Back to the Future to put there, which would have been awesome, like to have Back to the Future on the marquee in the theater in Back to the Future, right?
Right.
But he said no. He said they had a backup plan, and if they hadn't gotten St. Elmo's Fire, it would have actually been Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so that's which also would have played in pretty well with the movie, right? Given the somewhat violent nature of it.
For sure.
Did you figure out the mystery rather, early on, or did it take till the end?
You're talking about of the killer's identity?
Yep.
I thought I did. The whole time I was suspecting it was Giancarlo Esposito's character.
I did too.
And I feel like that was...
I don't feel dumb.
No, I think that was the obvious answer, and I think there were honestly kind of cues that they did to set that up on purpose to make me think that. And I had the character of Maxine's father, of the preacher, was in my head in the sense of that, like, when you see him on the TV, he's creepy as all hell in the beginning and end of X, especially when you realize that that's her dad. That you've been hearing on the TV, and because she quotes the "I will not accept a life I do not deserve" and divine intervention and all that. I just slipped into the accent there on accident. But
well,
I had not even thought of him as I had not even thought of him as a candidate for.
And first of all, they told us right at the beginning of the movie. The first scene, the first shot we see in the movie is of, Maxine as a little girl saying that, right? Yeah. And speaking to her dad who's off screen. But I like that we get that, I will not accept the life that I don't deserve or something, whatever it was, because the contrast with Pearl is that Pearl did accept it, right? Pearl did accept a life that she didn't want. And I think that it brings the whole story back full circle. I also thought you brought up Scream earlier. I know you're a big Scream fan. This brought up some Scream vibes to me, because if you take out Scream 4, 5, 6 and just keep the original trilogy, like, there was a little bit of a parallel here, because the killer in Scream 3, it's very personal to Sydney, right? Like, it comes back to someone that, she either knows or maybe should. And it's
I've got thoughts on that movie we'll do a review of eventually, I'm sure, as we whenever they make another one. But even I feel like even Scream 3 is in Hollywood, this one's in Hollywood. I feel like there's and you have the movie set piece, right? So I feel like there is a lot of
there's some Scream love in this
for sure.
series, for sure.
For sure.
And I just think horror slasher love as well. The first one had definite X had definite Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes to it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of love for the genre there. I would say, though, after walking out of this, that Maxine is more of almost like a thriller to me than a horror movie. It'll be classified as horror. But if you walk in expecting like straight up horror, like the first one or elements of the second, you're probably going to walk out a little underwhelmed.
Yeah. I don't think this movie was as scary as the other two, especially because the first two are much more psychological, and they do a lot with like sound and stuff, where you get like the weird voyeuristic POV shots of like Pearl watching them. And I think because the subject matter of X is so raunchy, there's something about that movie that inherently feels more uncomfortable, right? Because it's you're taking this thing that's supposed to be really beautiful and intimate between people and making it really perverse and scary and gross. Whereas with this one, I would say I don't think the moment-to-moment horror is there as much, but I think this movie has some of the most intense and memorable kills or gore moments that I've seen in a horror movie in a long time. And I'm not really squeamish or afraid of gore or whatever, but they were like audible reactions from me in this movie.
In one particular scene, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When she busts Buster.
Yep.
Oh, God.
If you've seen it, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, once you watch it, you'll know what we're talking about.
I don't think we can talk about it without getting demonetized.
Yeah.
But there is the one, the other one that stands out here real quick is the car one, where the guy, it's how they kill off Kevin Bacon's character, and it's brilliant because you put him in this car. He's handcuffed to the steering wheel that's in like a garbage compactor in like a junkyard, and you think the whole time like it's very much like a movie torture kind of trope of, the good guys might make someone to do something like that, but they wouldn't actually do it, right? And then so the whole time he's like begging, pleading. You think he's gonna give them some information, and he's gonna squeal, and they'll let him go, or there'll be a revelation there, but they don't. They just very slowly hydraulic press him. And the audio of that and the blood you see is just, it's absolutely nasty in the best way possible. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up, because it is another like throwback to 80s entertainment. That is such a staple of like 80s television, that we're going to take the good guy and like put him in the trunk of a car, take it to the junkyard, and put it in the compactor.
Right.
And so I feel like that may have been, an intentional thing. Like, hey, let's get this scene in because it's such an 80s thing. Except the good guy always gets out on TV, right? They always get out somehow, or something happens or whatever. And that definitely didn't occur here.
No, and well, that's the interesting mix of it is that like in this movie, our quote unquote good guys, our protagonists, are the ones doing the torture. Maxine tortures somebody twice in this movie, and neither of the time is really for getting information or trying to find something. She's really like she's playing with her food essentially, you know.
Is she the hero of the story? And
I don't think so. Like I don't think anyone really is.
I agree.
And I think the whole point of X is that I think it's about how this whole trilogy is about how fame and power and the pursuit of that like corrupts people fundamentally, right? It changes them as people, becomes their entire lives. And I've seen that as a criticism of these movies where people are saying that like Maxine is kind of boring as a character in this newest one because all she talks about is fame and I want to be famous. They're going to put me in the movies and I want to be in a big picture, blah, 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 blah. That's my big break. But I don't think that was like a writing flaw. I think that's really just like, that's all that motivates her. That's really all she's.
It is. It's also a very 80s thing.
It is.
I think.
For sure.
You know, the MTV era, all of that. I think it just captivated a lot of people. And you're right. Like I will become famous at any cost. And we've seen what the costs are, and she's willing to accept them. Right. And it almost comes back.
Yeah.
To get her at the end. What did you think of the entire like sequence that's going on in her mind when she's facing her dad and she has the shotgun in hand? So it's like almost like a dream sequence where it's like, here's the next months, years of my life.
You're talking about the very, very end almost when the helicopter is descending and I love that moment, and it very much feels like corny 80s movie end of a trilogy callbacks, right? Where you're getting like the flashes of the montage and oh my god, she said the thing. I think it worked really well, and I think like I've seen a lot of people also say they think the third act falls apart, and I think it's definitely goofy and campy and comes out of nowhere, but at the same time I feel like it's kind of appropriate, and I don't know, I loved the campiness of it. That whole scene of her giving incredibly performed monologue, and then you get him really hamming it up doing, I'm gonna perform the first televised exorcism, and he's got her tied up and whatever, and all of his congregations around him. It's a really eerie power. It's a powerful image, but it's also kind of I think it's silly enough that it doesn't feel too real or too serious, right? It gets you thinking about what they're trying to say without it being super uncomfortable. And I don't know, it's weird because I felt like going into this movie, I thought we were for sure going to get like bow on X, like this is over, this story is concluded, right? I was very much thinking of this as the end of a trilogy going in, and now I feel like this very much feels like part 2 of a trilogy, and Pearl was a prequel that established more context, but wasn't necessarily mainline to the story of Maxine's character.
Ti West has said that he is pretty much done with this right now, and that it would be years before he revisited it if he does. But the plan is to be done. But I can see what you're saying. Like I get that take, and I'm not sure. Like my last thing, 2 things. One, there's no secret made in this movie that the religious like protesters, etc., are the ones protesting against violence, yet they're the ones committing it throughout. And 2, when you talked about the third act, like I spent most of the third act just waiting for like the Miami Vice theme to hit because it was like it so seemed like what happens at the end of like a weekly like 80s buddy cop show, you know?
Especially with those buddy cop characters.
Yeah.
That popped up.
It just seemed like that so much, but I thought it was well done enough. It's in the 80s. You're supposed to like ham it up a little bit and
for sure
have fun with it. So I don't know. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. So any last thoughts on Maxine before we get out of here?
I feel like you've talked me up on it a little bit. I'm still sticking with the 7.5 score, but I could see it raising because I think this is one of those movies that we've talked a lot about because you and I have been to theaters a lot in
We have
this year so far. I've seen more movies in theaters this year than I think I have in like the 4 preceding it. You know, because we're about a dozen in, I think, at this point. There's a couple I saw that you haven't, some even higher than that. But like, I think we've talked to, anyway, that aside, we've talked a lot about seeing movies in the theaters versus seeing movies at home. And I think this is one of those movies that like I actually cannot wait to rewatch at home. Like I think this will be a 4K Blu-ray or 4K digital buy for me because I just like I want to make the popcorn, grab a couple of drinks, grab a couple of friends, and be able to like, you know, laugh at certain parts of this movie and have those reactions, have those conversations about things as they're happening, and you know, make a night out of it.
I actually feel like this movie's better for that type of environment, what you're talking
I do too.
about, than the actual theater going experience. But you know, don't let Ti West and the producers hear us say that.
Right?
They'll want you to go see it. But we say all the time, like, this movie needs to be seen in theaters, but not all of them do. And this is one where I feel like you're going to get a good experience watching this on digital. Like, you'll get exactly what's intended. So, in fact, I think horror movies are best, like, with a group of friends.
I agree.
You know, that type of thing. So, yeah. All right. That does it for this. We'll be back with another review later this week of Long Legs, I think.
I'm stoked.
That should be fun. And then after that, we have a dramatic departure into Twisters. and
then Deadpool the week after that,
Deadpool
right?
and Wolverine.
What a stacked month, man.
I can honestly watch the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer over and over and just be happy.
Yeah.
The trailer's so much fun.
I've got some catching up to do. I got to at least watch Deadpool 2 because I have seen the first one.
Yeah, I found a way to sneak part of the Deadpool trailer into my latest college football video. Nice. And it makes sense. So check that out if you're a fan of video games. Subscribe to our channel too. Along with movie reviews, we have a lot of stuff on gaming, including the new College Football 25 game that comes out a week from tomorrow. I can't believe I'm saying those words.
Woo!
So, with that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you subscribe, hit like on this video. We do really appreciate that. If you really like this type of content, please consider becoming a member to our channel. That would help us out a ton, and we'd appreciate more than you know. So with that, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you with the next movie.
Take care, y'all.